Hey guys, it's Matt. James sent me this movie, Doctor Sleep. I had never heard of it. He said, "Have you watched Doctor Sleep?" I said, "Never heard of it." It's the almost 40-year sequel to The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's 1980 The Shining. Everybody knows it, of course. It was a few years before that a Stephen King novel. This is also a Stephen King novel. So he sent it to me for a lot of different reasons, but I want to tell you about that I did watch it. I really liked watching it after visiting The Shining. I really think you have to see The Shining like a week before or back to back or the day before. I'm really glad I did that. So another reason to talk about Doctor Sleep is I don't think any movie has ever presented the idea of energy vampirism or louche sucking as much as this movie does. This woman here, this energy vampire witch who, if there is any truth drop in this movie, she's representing a class of individual that literally feeds off the energy of real people, real spirits, but they look for certain types of people that shine, that have the brightest light, that almost have a magic to them, the way Neo would be above Morpheus and the rest of the crew that ate the tasty wheat. And certain we've been talking about the theme over and over that people here kind of aren't the same, and that's where the term "The Shining" comes from. Danny, in the original movie, he has something special about him that Scatman Carruthers, the cook, identifies early on. Not everybody shines, Danny, and we think a little bit of that about ourselves. Do we shine? Are we able to see certain things for certain reasons? So I have a ton of tabs open here, guys. There's a lot to see, but you don't have to see this. If I'll try to talk through it and remember that some people are driving or not watching, and there's nothing monumental I'm going to show you. I might, if I talk about the Baphomet related to a few things here and bring up the Levi artwork, well, you've all seen it. So I'm going to pull it up, but are you really missing anything? Not really. So let's start. I'm going to have the fandom I looked into, where it was filmed, try to bring in, the possible truth drops, and just be completely all over the place. This is going to be, more entertainment than any kind of pulling something out of how reality itself operates. We'll leave that for another video, but I bet something does come out of this if we dive into it deep enough. So, again, you have The Shining, 1980, and then you have this Doctor Sleep movie, almost 40 years later. 40 years later. And when the system does things like this, are they really trying to camp on to The Shining success, waiting 40 years to do this? No. Maybe they could have got the idea for a Shining sequel before 40 years. So, yeah, I'm sure there's some truth drops, and if nothing else, the energy vampirism and the loose sucking by itself is like I've never seen it presented this so blatantly. So let's start back with the Shining, guys. I saw it a long time ago, and I'm so glad I saw it again recently before watching Doctor Sleep. James said, "You really don't have to watch the Shining before, and you don't have to for Doctor Sleep, but I'm really glad I did." Doctor Sleep had a whole new meaning because I just rewatched The Shining. And The Shining didn't mean anything to me. I guess I watched it initially when I was still a Matrix child. And I watched The Shining more for fun the other day. I wasn't looking at every little scene and breaking down the backgrounds and doing that with that set of eyes. But I just saw it completely differently, of course, as you and I would see. We could go revisit a lot of things and see them completely differently. But the thing that really stood out, I don't know what kind of television or if I saw it on cable, but if you go back and revisit The Shining, which I absolutely recommend if you haven't done this in 15 or 20 years, I couldn't believe the cinematography, how clear and crisp it was, and the quality of how it was filmed back in 1980. The first 5 minutes wherever they filmed it. I'll talk about. It's supposed to be the well, it's called the Overlook Hotel in the movie, and we'll get into this in a minute. But they filmed a lot of it, or the outside, around this Timberline Lodge, which is close to Fort Hood in Oregon.
Mount Hood.
But that were originally Stephen King, and it was based upon the Stanley Hotel. And this is in Colorado. It's supposed to be in Colorado, about 2 hours up in the Colorado Rockies from Boulder. So based on the place that Stephen King stayed, it's supposed to be the Stanley Hotel. It's called the Overlook Hotel in the movie, and they filmed the outside at the Timberline Hotel, so which is outside of or close to Fort Hood in Oregon.
Sorry, guys, I did it again. Mount Hood, not Fort Hood.
But just the cinematography coming in, which maybe is the Colorado Rockies, it could be the Canadian Rockies. It's incredible if you're watching it on a Blu-ray or a large, one of these big flat screens. How crisp, how incredible these mountains are. The first 5 minutes as the movie comes on by itself is worth watching again. It's just some of the most incredible footage you've ever seen, and it goes back to 1980. So I just am glad that I did revisit The Shining for a lot of reasons, and we'll move off The Shining in a moment. You guys have all seen it. But this kid, Danny, I mean, you want to talk about child actors and how, I mean, this kid was incredible. There's 5 little kids that you can or might be comparable in all of movie history from 1980 till now. This is just an amazing what this kid did. And, you know, he had that imaginary friend, Tony, pulled up the little finger. He's like, "Are you talking to me now, Danny?" "No, this is Tony." You know, it's like it's really cool. I mean, how, and the kid, then what they do for Dr. Sleep is they recreate the beginning of The Shining, and they get a different kid. This kid does a pretty good job. He's no Danny from the original Shining. He's pretty good. But it evolves into Dr. Sleep is more about a grown-up Danny. This Ian, is his name Ian McGregor? And, you know, not doing Danny too much justice there, Obi-Wan Kenobi. But, you know, I'm not a big fan of this guy, and like Big Fish and this stuff, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But you know what? He's pretty darn good in this movie. It's pretty darn good. So Dr. Sleep is supposed to be, this is little Danny. Dr. Sleep, Ian McGregor, this is Danny grown up, struggling with his demons.
Wow, I have to correct another mistake. I called him Ian McGregor. It's Ewan or something like that. So what, right? If you want me to pronounce your name correctly, do a better job with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
To most people watching The Shining, it just seems like a horror movie that just, Jack Nicholson, as they're up there watching this hotel, abandoned hotel. They abandon it in the winter. And guys, when they show it in The Shining, where the snow's piling up to the roof, and they have to abandon it, but they're there. He brings the family in as a writer. He wants solitude, peace, and quiet. They're going to be there for something like 5 months by themselves, all snowed in. And it's real. When they show, people from the East Coast and other parts of the world don't realize this, they show snow piled up to the roof. Certain parts of the Sierra Nevadas or the Rockies or in Oregon, outside Klamath Falls. I mean, some of these places, they can get 20 to 25 feet of snow where half the building is covered. They have to actually dig the building out for 2 weeks as the spring comes. So this is actually very, very real and legitimate, and people don't kind of realize this unless you're from Western U.S., how much snow. I've driven through roads where there's 12 feet or 15 feet of snow on each side. You're just driving through a tunnel because of the snow, and this is in the spring. It's 65 degrees outside. It takes weeks and weeks to melt out. So people watch this movie, The Shining, they think it's just a horror movie. It is a horror movie, but they don't look into it for anything more like we would. As the weeks go by, Jack Nicholson gets more and more crazy, and then he just starts killing his family, and that's all there is to it, and it's just a horror movie. And take it on the first level, at the popcorn cruncher level, it's still good, but what the movie is really about is fully explained, and it's not explained when you watch The Shining. It's explained in Doctor Sleep. They took 40 years to explain The Shining, and even somebody that has an eye for this, you and I, we need Doctor Sleep to really understand what's going on. It's not just about him going, the hotel and the ghosts and the demons in the hotel how much is Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance fighting his own demons and his own, he's ex-alcoholic and all this, or how much is it the hotel and the demons of the hotel taking him over? Well, okay, that's how the horror movie plays out in The Shining, but it's the more important theme that evolves into Doctor Sleep is one of the early scenes with the cook. This character, he's the cook in The Shining. He notices something about Danny, and it's like Scatman Crothers died back in 1986. He says, "You're special, Danny, aren't you? You have, we call it shine," and they can actually communicate telepathically. And very early on, he has shine, and they kind of, he senses that Danny has these telepathic and special abilities, and actually talks to Danny about it very early on in The Shining. And this is a huge theme in The Shining that, maybe this is why there's all this lore in the fandom, how Stephen King was very upset with Stanley Kubrick and his adaptation of the book. Didn't like what he did at all. And, in the fake reality that's presented, guys, I think basically everything laid down like that is some sort of a script, society crafted for whole reality crafted from the outside. No, I don't believe legitimately Stephen King, that two agents at the absolute, sit just outside the creepy table, that Stephen King was very upset at Stanley Kubrick for not being true to the initial intentions of what the novel was in 1977. I don't buy that for a second. No, like Stephen King think about it, think it through. Now, Stanley Kubrick was no absolute legend at this time. Okay, he did 2001: A Space Odyssey. He's not the legend now. You would think, he could do whatever he wants. No, in 80, he was no legend in 1980. Okay, this happens over time. So Stephen King, the writer, who he already had a big success in Carrie, he's not going to have full control over his own novel. Where Stephen King stayed, this remote hotel in the Colorado Rockies, the historic Stanley Hotel. This is what it's, based on, per the, inspiration Stephen King got. Okay, the Stanley Hotel. Let's close that out. Let's look at where it was filmed on the outside. The incredible cinematography coming into the movie The Shining was this Timberline Lodge outside. I hope I didn't say Fort Hood. Mount Hood, Portland. Mount Hood outside Portland or in Oregon. This is the outside. Okay, so let's close this out. And then the other thing again is the Overlook is the name they put on it for the movie, which doesn't exist. It's not the Stanley, it's not the Timberline, it's the Overlook. And they actually, just FYI in the fandom, a whole scene in Ready Player One was based on The Shining and going back into the set of the Overlook Hotel, but here in Ready Player One, which is a virtual environment, basically they're all playing their own avatar characters virtually in a video game. They go into a movie theater, and then scenes from The Shining play out in Ready Player One, including the ballroom scene where they find the next jade key or whatever it is. It's that same green color repeats again in Ready Player One. So let me close this out. I want to show you this. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia. The Timberline Lodge is a mountain lodge on the south. I mean, look how this is so bizarre. All right, there's just no way this is accurate. And you wonder, who would, again, we talk about how much of this is bot driven. It just doesn't seem like a person would do this. It seems like this is like a bot mistake somehow, pulling its information from some other source of information that was riddled with a computer virus or something. So it talks about, it's on the south side of Mount Hood, about 60 miles east of Portland, constructed from 1936 to 1938 by the Works Progress Administration and furnished by local artisans during the Great Depression. All right. Dedicated by Franklin Roosevelt and all the stuff that was magically built during the New Deal with money that shouldn't have existed. So you look into this, and it says here, if I can find it, where is it? Oh, here it is, up top. All right. Publicly owned now and privately operated, Timberline Lodge is a popular tourist attraction that draws 2 million visitors annually. Anybody have a problem with that? 2 million visitors annually. It wasn't even the main focus of The Shining. It just was the outside shots of The Shining. Nothing inside, just the outside, driving up. This is how they used it in The Shining. 2 million visitors. That's approaching 6,000 people a day. 6,000 a day go see. Let's see what parking spaces they have. They have a parking lot the size of a stadium. Yeah, looks like 6,000 people a day. How many cars? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 25 cars. That's like, I don't know. 2 million, 7 days a week. Without a day off, without a holiday, it's around 5,700 visitors a day. Sure. So you just wonder where this comes from. It says Timberline Lodge is a popular tourist attraction that draws 2 million visitors annually. No, it doesn't. As a comparison point, the Lenin's tomb, not Grant's tomb, Lenin's tomb or Lenin's mausoleum, or I think his body's still preserved in Red Square. That's kind of a big tourist. Red Square, one of the main attractions in the world, if people that aren't afraid to go into Russia, 2.5 million people a year. So Lenin in Red Square draws just a little bit more than the Timberline Lodge on the south side of Mount Hood. Okay. The Shining. Let's look at the tail of the tape in Wikipedia quickly, because this was very interesting. The Minions, or the reality itself, is always trying to create, or its gematria always has to flow. And I thought this was interesting. The running time for the original U.S. premiere was 146 minutes. But there was some strange scene at the end where it showed Wendy, Jack Nicholson's wife, recovering in somebody's house. It was just 2 minutes long. And the movie didn't do well initially, The Shining, so Stanley Kubrick made a call and said, we need to cut out the last 2 minutes and then reissue the movie all over the country. Like, so this emergency cut out of just the last 2 minutes. So it went from 146 premiere to 144. Is that so important for how the movie would do, that that last scene with Wendy recovering from her ordeal, 2 minutes had to be cut out, and this major emergency? So I don't, what are you saying, Matt? Why? I don't know. I'm just saying I don't buy the cover story. As usual, I don't buy basically any cover story that Wikipedia presents me anymore, for the most part. Well, why would they need to cut out 2 minutes? I don't see the gematria in it. I don't know. I don't buy the cover story. He didn't look at that last scene 20 times, 150 times, and he's just in the theater going, we got to get rid of those. I don't buy it. So whatever. But it relates to, like, Matt, what are you talking about this? And you're wasting my time. Well, it relates to this. They had to cut out, for the European release, had to cut a bunch of the slower conversational scenes out. Which can get a little bit long, but it had to go to 119 minutes for the European release. The gematria has to flow, or the gematria has to be created by the creeps for their power. So you might, to get to 119, which is, the 7-Eleven job application backwards to get to the 119 that they seemed to needed to get to for runtime. Maybe they had to make it look legitimate and say, well, the U.S. version was edited too. Why would you need to cut all this out? Why would you need to cut essential scenes that are just needed to be shown in the U.S., but the Europeans, they just don't have the patience to for those conversational scenes? No, I think it's more that they had to get to the 119, but that's just me. That's like saying, people that believe that, there were the 13 appears all over the back of the dollar bill because of the 13 colonies. People that believe that, where it's obviously the other side of it. There were originally 13 colonies, and they carved up the map to make 13 because of the occult power that they derive in some way from 13. I mean, it's obviously that's the case. Not that all the stuff. That's the dumbed down version. That's the dumbed down version of Columbia and Manifest Destiny and all that crap that they give you on Wikipedia. So I thought that was interesting. Let's get rid of this. I'm done with this guy. The Grand Overlook Hotel. This, every time I see this, reminds me of that kind of amazing. Was it the Grand Hotel was it Christopher Reeve from the Mandela Effect? I don't know if it's Reeve or Reeves. I'm confused. I love time travel stuff, and it is sappy and romantic or whatever, but I think it's a good movie. That Somewhere in Time about we'll talk about that sometime, how he goes back to this Grand Hotel to meet, he's fixated on the young Jane Seymour. But we'll talk about that. So this reminds me of that. But before talking about the creepiest thing or the strangest thing that's not explained in The Shining, that has a lot of theories, is at the very last scene. They're staying in the hotel that's abandoned, but this hotel has this 100-year history, and Jack Nicholson sees some ghosts of the people that stayed in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and at the end of the movie, you see, I'll focus in on this in a second, guys, this picture. I'll describe it if you're just listening. The end of the movie, they show a picture, and I think it says here 1921, of guests at the hotel. This is in the movie The Shining, at the very end of The Shining, and guests from the 20s. And there's Jack Nicholson, in the same age, 30-some years old or close to 40, standing in this picture, doing the Baphomet, but let's just talk about, we'll get into that in a moment. Let's just, as it's presented to the regular movie-going audience, almost none of the regular movie-going audience would pick that up. I mean, like 99 point whatever percent people that rented this movie at Blockbuster through 2000 and whatever, they would never pick this stuff up, but we'll talk about that in a second. So let me just focus on it. You have this picture from the 20s, and let me try to move this down, guys. Hold on a second. Let's see if this helps. I don't know. Is that going to help? No, I got to move it up. Sorry. Well, you can see more of it there. He has just hotel guests, and then you have the movie fades out. You have Jack Nicholson. He's now appeared in this picture, and it says 1921. You can't see that. Now the hand gesture, you can't see his left hand, but it is pointing. It's exactly what the Baphomet is doing in the Levi depiction: right hand up, left hand down, and of course the Baphomet and the as above, so below. Now, the theory is that the caretaker, there's actually a ghost or a reincarnation of the caretaker in The Shining, that there was another incident or another murder years before where another family was murdered, and that ghost says to Jack Nicholson when he's starting to go crazy, Jack, and his name is Jack Torrance, still Jack to Jack, you've always been the caretaker here. And so one in a fandom page would say that this is showing that the Jack Nicholson has always been the caretaker, and basically he's reincarnated over and over again. And if you look at the old pictures from the Overlook Hotel, you would see Jack Nicholson. If Danny looked at the pictures as a kid, he would see his father in the old pictures. Now, I don't buy this because this is the official version that Kubrick presents. Now, it doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to kind of say that the way Kubrick explains it to the populace is probably not what was really intended. I mean, that's just the way the reality does business, but first and foremost, but that's Kubrick. He's not going to say, let me tell you exactly what I meant here. So one of the fandoms said, yeah, Kubrick told us that this picture here shows Jack Nicholson because he's reincarnated and he always has been the caretaker. And, that is one version, but if Kubrick told us, I doubt it. So there are other explanations for this in the fandom. One, it's like a portrait of Dorian Gray. Sorry, for the Mandela effect. It's the picture of Dorian Gray. I guarantee you that that's like an anchor effect for me. It was the portrait of Dorian Gray. But it's showing this picture is like the portrait of Dorian Gray. If you find this image or this old picture in the Overlook Hotel, it would show kind of like one of the theories is all the victims that the hotel claimed and its ghosts and demons claimed. So, of course, Jack Nicholson, the last scene, he's dead, frozen out there. And potentially in some way, all the people the hotel claimed are appearing together. Who knows where they are. And I think it's a much better explanation than what, Kubrick told us. He ain't going to tell us anything straight up. So, and if you have theories on this, guys, this is very interesting. This really makes the movie. For me, this at the end really puts a nice cherry on top. So let's go on. Just showing the everybody's seen the Levi depiction of the Baphomet. Jack Nicholson at the front of that image is doing the exact same hand gesture, of course, and we've all, everything about the Baphomet is a mirror image. Salva, coagula, come together, break apart, tits on a man, as above, so below. Well, it's just, I'm no expert at breaking that shit down. We've all, how many videos have we seen on this stuff anyway? But I wanted to show you this. Morpheus does it. It might be the inverse. When he's saying, this is the construct program. He's in that suit. If anybody's just listening, all white behind him. Neo's just trying to get a sense as to what the hell's going on. And he does the exact same hand gesture, the obvious, even though it's reversed, this time his left hand is going up, but it's obviously the Baphomet, as above, so below, presented by Morpheus, an overacting, chubby Morpheus. An overacting chubby Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus. All right, let's do Dr. Sleep. Again, I highly recommend you watch The Shining first, and maybe just a week or two apart before Dr. Sleep. It really helped me. I don't think I would have appreciated. I don't think I would have almost not liked it, but I really liked it because I just seen The Shining. I don't think others would find that connection so important, but I do. So, again, in Dr. Sleep, you have Danny, the kid from The Shining, who had the shine, who had the magic to him, or we take away from it is like a person closer attached to their spiritual self, or the opposite end of an NPC. That's the way I see shine that Scatman Carruthers talked about. Danny, he's like, you have shine, you're special, and that theme comes back in Dr. Sleep, but it's mostly about Ewan McGregor here is supposed to be a grown-up Danny, and he's just beaten up. For 20-some years, he's alcoholism or drug abuse, and let his life go to hell, and fights in bars, and, just hooking up with girls he doesn't know, and just he's a mess. He's an absolute mess. And most of the beginning of Dr. Sleep is about him getting clean. And he's also, you can see during this time, kind of repressed his shine, or maybe the lifestyle choices he's made. He doesn't have any shine. He doesn't have any powers. And they do start to emerge as he gets clean or starts to walk the right path. A little bit of of a truth drop there. So as this is going on, you have a parallel theme in Dr. Sleep. It was just about him getting clean. That ain't too good for 2.5 hours. At least in today's movie, you have, who's this? I guess her name is Rose. And she's the leader of these, I don't know, it's like a bad guy gang. But they are energy harvesters, loosh suckers, energy vampires, parasites, and they basically they do hunt down children who they identify have shine, have power. They would, in the Matrix, they would find the Spoon Boy and hunt the Spoon Boy down, because Spoon Boy was had those qualities over others. And they as they torture the kid to death, they drink its energy, or its loosh. It's not a truth drop. It's just blatant. I don't think any movie's ever presented that there's an entity class here that's potentially. No movie's ever made this parallel as blatantly as this, where she represents a small group that literally just need to go suck the energy from real people. And when she identifies one with shine, like Danny, they move mountains to go get that and suck that pure ambrosia. So she's the leader. I don't know if there's too much other of her gang shown here. Somebody imposed Kathy Bates or something, that she's not in the movie. She does a good job. This actress, is replaceable. She's good, but she's not like Danny was in the original Shining. She's good, but you could replace her with a lot of different actresses. No offense, darling, if you're listening to this. But the hat and everything, I mean, they don't, they're not making her look too evil. Most men would think most scenes she looks pretty good, but the hat, I guess that they did their best. They can't make her look all. She's supposed to look pretty and everything. I mean, so they did put the hat on her, like that's supposed to make a big difference. But it's a reference to the Baron Cimetiere. My French is not too good. It's probably sounded Italian. Baron Cimetiere. I took in 7th grade. We had take a month of German, French, and Spanish to decide what language we would take. I chose Spanish. I took that for years. Can't speak that either. But it's Baron Cemetery. Won't say it again, but it's the Baron Cemetery is Baron Cemetery, very famous spirit in Bayou and New Orleans and Haitian voodoo character. Very, very famous. Also portrayed in the James Bond film that the worship of these type of spirits. The James Bond film that dealt with voodoo. That had remember the guy, if anybody over age 50 remembers the guy that did the 7-Up commercials, the black guy that did the 7-Up commercials, and he would go, ha, 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 ha. Anyway, you're not going to understand that. But he was in that James Bond movie. Anyway, that's who this is. So basically, it's a lame stunt. I mean, like you're saying this movie's good, but you put a Baron Cimetiere hat on this woman and all of a sudden she's evil. Yeah, well, that's the best they could do. There's a parallel theme running in Dr. Sleep where Ewan McGregor's getting his, as Danny, he's getting his life back, but they've identified this young girl named Abra, from short for Abracadabra. She's probably, I don't know, in 8th grade in something, or 8th or 9th grade, or maybe 7th or 8th grade, and she has tremendous power. And this group, they sense it, and they're starving. Another huge truth drop theme in this movie is as they recruit people, they promise a pseudo immortality. Like, no, we can't tell you live forever, but this guy, he's been with us since the Roman Empire, and we just live forever if we feed correctly, if we eat correctly. And when they first say it, or he first presents it early on in the movie, you're like, eat right, do your push-ups and sit-ups, like eat right. But she's talking about feeding from the right energy, with the right loosh. And then there's several conversations with her and the rest of her gang where she's starving. All right, this is the little girl that has the tremendous shine power. And because as Ian McGregor here, Danny cleans his act up, they start to connect telepathically. Her crew is desperate to feed. So basically, the truth drop is millions and millions of people, looking out over Los Angeles, and they're starving. There's like, basically, it's an NPC truth drop. There's nobody out here to feed on. There's nobody close to spirit. There's nobody with shine. There's nobody special. There's no spoon boys. There's no Neos. It's just, imagine going into Zion and just a bunch of nothing but a fat Morpheus is sitting around eating Chef Boyardee. There ain't no Neos. Ain't no chance to ever get out of that. So she's like, we're starving. And then they detect this little girl, and they're like going to move mountains. They'll go across the country to try to get her and find her and to drink from her. And it's very interesting how then she connects up, telepathically with Danny. And I'm not describing this very well. It does bring back, at least towards the end, scenes from the Overlook Hotel. And this is the bartender coming. It's supposed to be Jack Nicholson. He's, in this case, serving Danny, serving Ian McGregor. They return to the Overlook Hotel at the end. I was pleasantly surprised that it was as good as it was. And not a whole lot more to say. Guys, the red room comes up again, but that's just murder backwards. And this is where he starts to communicate telepathically through this writing. She writes on the board, he writes on the board, and then eventually he connects with her via his mind. And it's a little cheesy at times, but I liked it. And no movie has ever portrayed Loosh or the need to suck souls, to sustain themselves, well, there have been similar themes like Carol Ann in The Poltergeist, the thing, the beast, whatever it is, and through the portal in the closet, it needs a pure life source of Carol Ann. It needs to be close to it. It craves to be close to it. It's that same theme, but they will go get a little kid, and there is one scene. It's pretty damn disturbing. I mean, they basically tore this. It's just a little kid. I mean, it's really disturbing that they show this even, but this kid is tortured, and you see the steam. It's the energy or the soul stuff is the steam that comes out in this movie, and they suck it, they drink it. And if anybody new is here, many of us believe that the whole way society is structured is to, this is a direct showing of Loosh, where they actually, stab the kid and then suck the soul stuff. And, we've seen that in other movies in similar fashion, even with Dracula or whatever. But we think there's the whole way society is structured, there's almost no other way to explain how things operate in, culture and society out your window, because the whole thing is on purpose set up to orchestrate the maximum amount, or to elicit the maximum amount of stress, anxiety, worry, anger, fear. I mean, it's just, and this is similar to like the Loosh sucking they portray in the movie. This is the whatever feeds from that in this reality is feeding on the collective frequency that's put out, or like an energy wave, or a harmonics or resonance or something. But they have to turn everybody down the dial. So hundreds of millions of people a day of real people. How many are background people or organic portals? We don't know, but how many ever there are set up via culture and society to just churn out fear, worry, stress, anxiety, greed, jealousy, avarice, covet, all the 7 deadly sins plus 7 other ones of, stress, worry, anxiety, all that stuff. And something has to feed from it. And there's no other way. It just works too hard to create these emotions and these energy, this energy wave that comes out through a whole population. It just works too hard. Why would it need to create energy down that end of the dial, down that end of the spectrum, if it wasn't feeding from it? I don't know if there's any other explanation, because obviously 80 to 90% of the things in culture and society that cause fear, stress, anxiety, anger, and worry, at least as it comes through society and culture, could be eliminated, could have been eliminated in the 90s, in the 80s, and it's still here. That's actually much, much worse. So it gives itself away in that regard, how all those things that elicit that frequency down the end of the dial has just gotten worse over time. It all could have been, been taken away. And, what's the point of creating all that frequency if something isn't feeding from it? So this movie shows it. She might even be holding the canister here. They kind of bottle it up in a thermos type thing. And when they get really desperate, they open one of these thermoses up, and all the whole gang kind of crowds around, and they snort it up like cocaine, like to sustain themselves. Came back to do one more section for anybody that's new. And we have so many different examples of this, but I was just thinking as I was editing a few sections before publishing the video, one of the main differences between a first grade truther, and we all went through the steps, I'm not putting anybody down, we all evolved over time, but one difference between a first grade truther and a more experienced truther is, that would sound so funny to somebody on the outside of us, right? Is the first grade truther always looks for explanations as to why things are being done a certain way inside the bookends of known reality or inside their toy box. So if we present real evil dictators, dictators like Kim Jong-un, real menaces to the world, people, the first grade truther says, well, Matt, I'm starting to see that this is a presentation of some kind, but controlled by the West or controlled by China, or maybe there's a gentleman's agreement between China and the West. And see, they need bogeymen, so they can justify a $650 billion a year defense budget, and that's just for the United States. Okay, it's not one or the other. I'll give you that, but that's not the final reason they do it. It's when they need to, or if they can use this guy, or they've used him and his father 50 times over 25 years to create fear. Oh, they're going to get the nuclear program going again. And now that, okay, that's been pacified with this. Obviously, everything is a construct. Everything is a fake presentation. There's no real deal between Donald Trump, and they're all both actors on both sides. So it's not about the first grade truther just looks inside their toy box for answers. Oh, it's just about the money. It's always just about the money. Or when that's what the first grade truther would look at what was going on in Syria and say, oh, they want to build a pipeline. It's just about corporate money. I mean, that is so first grade. That doesn't mean, if I say it's about putting millions of people down the end of the dial to get them fear, get them worried, and when they need to again, you think this is just going to go away forever? You don't think they'll bring North Korea back at some point and bring a crisis back? Of course they will when they need to. And because if I'm saying ultimately it's used to generate loosh or certain frequencies down certain ends of the dial, that doesn't mean it's not about money. It can be multiple benefits to the minions that serve the system at the same time. Of course it helps Raytheon or whatever get a contract to build more missiles. You have to have boogeymen or bogeymen in the world. But see, that if somebody's crying out from their bathtub, I can hear you saying, well, if they're presenting evil boogeymen, why does he doesn't instill fear? Look at him. Nobody would, anybody listening the sound of my voice would, just for $5, get in the ring of bare knuckle boxing with this guy. There'd be no fear, or he's not a fearful person. I mean, yeah, but Matt, it doesn't take somebody that looks menacing to push a button. He can still generate fear. Okay, but somebody crying out and saying, if they're trying to make this menacing dictator, like a Robert Mugabe type, is a weird menacing look to him, why would they present this clown show? Because it's almost like they have to. This is also an inflated tire. I don't know. I can't explain it. If you present a 15-year running script of the biggest threat to the world, a horrible dictator. That there's stories of him killing his own family. And an uncle looked at him the wrong way, and then he thought he was going to take power, so he went off and had him killed. All these stories. Then you put up is, or how the reality has to do business, so real people can see right through it. So real Dannies that shine, or Danielles, we want to keep it equal. Or there's a lot of other potential things according to New York State pronoun list. So let's not be discriminatory. I mean, you have to put up a clown show. You can't put up somebody that really looks menacing. You can't put up a character like the Daniel Lewis. What's his name? Anyway, he was from the Last of the Mohicans, and I was going to say D-Day from Animal House, Last of the Mohicans. But the character he played in Bill Cutting, he played in Gangs of New York, is a truly intimidating, scary character. One of the great. This is a Hannibal Lecter type character. Incredible performance. I should see if he won the Oscar for it. Like that's legitimate. So it really doesn't matter. But if they really wanted to, somebody screaming out at me, well, why wouldn't they put up a Bill Cutting from Gangs in New York? He'd scare the crap out of people, because this is like how they have to do business. He's still able to generate fear or whatever because his hand's on the button, and any little roly-poly guy can push a button. But ultimately, they have to put up a guy that just looks so. You couldn't put a less menacing looking person in the character role he's been playing as the most menacing person. It's almost like they have to create that dichotomy. But I guess I'm not really explaining well, but you know what I mean. So there are thousands of examples like this where it's not just about coming up with the explanation that's in your toy box. Why the Waffle House waitress is my favorite example in the whole world. Why he or she has to be under the same tax code, the same 80,000 some pages that Warren Buffett's subject to. When, if anything were real, 50 years ago, the Waffle House waitress would be subject to a 1/2 page document. They would just submit a 1/2 page document, and that would be the end of it. But it could have all gone away 50 years ago. But then the first grade truthers look in their toy box and say, well, Matt, don't you understand the lobbying influences of the tax attorneys and the tax preparers like H&R Block, and they have a lot of influence, Matt. Imagine it would put a lot of them out of work. And it's always about money, and it's always about the logical explanation that's in their toy box, and that's what a first grade truther does. I just wanted to bring this into the conversations we're talking about. The real reason things happen the way they happen is you have to look at who's sucking the energy, at who's feeding off the fear and the stuff presented in Dr. Sleep. So thanks for listening, guys, and watching, and be back soon. Rob's on vacation, but we can probably get something up on Free Voice by Sunday, I would think, at the latest. And Howdy McCoskey's doing some stuff on Free Voice now as well. And we'll probably get, over time, another person or two. Thanks, guys.